The voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. And it is time for our conversation. We've been talking about this morning with Joel Sansone, Save Our Saltsburg Schools. Of course, you've been involved in this for quite some time. Mr. Sansone, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks very much for having me.
I'm glad you're with us here this morning. We talked a couple of years ago, probably during the last round of these Saltsburg and Blairsville talks, about your group and your objections to any plan to close the Saltsburg School. And obviously last night the vote did finally come through, which, the natural question has to be, what's your next step?
Well, first of all, I think you may be showing your age by saying that was a couple years ago. It was a little over 9 years ago that we first entered the fray.
Wow.
And were able to stop this consolidation at that time. Now, since that time, there have been other efforts that have failed, but this one seems to have gained momentum, and obviously the worst of what we all feared came true last night, despite all of the efforts by everybody to stop this. So the next steps, of course, depend in large measure on the reaction by the Department of Education. First of all, there has to be a final vote, as I understand it, at the next board meeting, which I believe is in second week of May, to finalize this vote, at which point we are going to make a direct appeal, as we already have, to the Department of Education to not certify this consolidation vote. However, I got to tell you, Todd, I don't think that from what we've heard, we're going to have much help from the state. Mm-hmm. Folks in Harrisburg have seemed to turn a blind eye to this, and I hope that doesn't continue to be true. But because I believe that we're not going to get help from that department, I think that what the next step will be is to seek intervention in the federal court. The 14th Amendment provides that we are required to have the due process of law when it comes to our rights. The problem here is the school board has ignored the 14th Amendment, has no idea how to give due process in a situation like this. You don't have any real planning done for this ridiculous move that they're planning. There's inadequate facilities in the Blairsville campus for all these students. There is no plan for how to deal with the overflow, where these kids are going to be, where they're going to eat. The cafeterias aren't big enough. There's a lot of problems just from the physical standpoint. Forget the fact that at some point next year, apparently, if we can't stop this, there's going to be children that are going to be bused for over an hour and a half one way just to get to school on any given day. If all those kids live through a winter drive on the back roads of Saltsburg, if none of them gets maimed or killed in a bus accident because they're on the road more and more and more, those kids are going to arrive at school, in a frenetic state, tired already. They're going to put in a full school day and get in that bus and ride back again at the end of the day, unless, of course, they have extracurricular activities, in which case they get home at 8 o'clock at night, get their dinner, and maybe start their homework at 9 o'clock. The economic impact on this community is going to be devastating. And quite frankly, the economic impact on the entire school district is going to be devastating because, as I understand it, from what I've been told by scores of residents, they're never going to send their kids to Blairsville. They'll go to cyber school instead. Mm-hmm. So, Todd, I just can't tell you how bad the impact of this is going to be if the courts and the Department of Education allow this to happen.
Would your court case be strengthened, weakened, or would it be affected at all by the fact of the pandemic forcing so many of the proceedings to have gone on virtually rather than in person?
Well, I think that may be a little bit of a red herring in the sense that, in my opinion, it wouldn't matter if the people were all standing there, in the school saying the same things as they said online. The overwhelming response by the citizenry has been, we don't want this. And, frankly, we've all learned during the pandemic that you can communicate, through Zoom and Skype and some of these other things, sometimes just as well. So I don't think that's the issue. The bigger issue is there is no planning for this. For example, there was no highway study done, no transportation study done. We did transportation studies this time and 10 years ago, which clearly showed this impact on these kids. There's been no economic analysis that we're aware of, and none has been shared with the people. We have done an economic analysis that shows that this will cost this district millions and millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. There has been no explanation as to why we're going to start a new STEAM academy in the district when a well-functioning, highly professionally trained STEAM academy already exists. And when Blairsville, Saltsburg pulls out of that academy, it will economically impact all of the other school districts that use that STEAM academy. And not only that, so many of the residents have told me, I'm not sending my kid to, a Phil Martell created at the last minute STEAM academy. So the lack of planning for this, the failure to be transparent by this school board and by this new superintendent, wherever he came from, these should be fatal to this project, and it is our strong hope that a federal judge will intervene and stop it.
Some of the people who have written to us here at Renda Broadcasting have said that what needs to happen from the Saltsburg community standpoint is the judge needs to issue some sort of a temporary injunction just to get through to the election where the school board could be overturned. That isn't a long-term solution, though, because this is always going to be a threat to the Saltsburg community as long as there are two schools. And that whole issue is something that delaying action, I know that's probably not your best course of action, is it?
Well, I will say this. We would certainly like a permanent injunction on this, but I don't think that a judge has the ability to do that. I mean, 10 years from now, it's not clear what the facts will be. Certainly, it would be great to be able to say, you're never allowed to do this, but that would probably be beyond the judge's power. But I would say this. We have, for nearly a decade, prevented this. And you think about that, that's the entire school career, almost, of how many students we have saved from the disaster that would have occurred 10 years ago. If I could buy another 10 years, it would be a temporary solution, but it would still save an entire generation of students.
He's attorney Joel Sansone. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know it's been an awfully busy week for you involved with the Eric Kasparovich situation of Pine Richland, and you do need to find a way to get away, don't you?
Well, my wife has an entire list of things that have not gotten done while I've been doing all this, so I've got my work to do this weekend.
There you go. All right, get back to the yard work. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye now.
Take care, bye.
There's Joel Sansone. He is the attorney for the Save Our Saltsburg Schools